I believe that we need to increase our exports 20% from our community as a 6th district in the next 2 years. And as a country as a whole, we need to increase our exports that way. And I think the old idea of free trade versus fair trade is a false setup in the first place. I don't believe that that's true. I used to go to the business, or I would be going to the business community groups and saying, talking about fair trade, and they would say, that's code word for protectionism. And I say, no, it's exactly the opposite. America trades freely. It's the other countries, such as China, that don't. So we do need fair trade, and that in part means confronting countries that don't trade fairly. And that would include China's manipulation of their currency, other technical barriers to trade that they put in place, transfer of technology that they demand when we set up businesses there. So confronting China on one end, but on the other end, we need to support our small businesses and medium-sized businesses that export through local economic gardening programs, such as one of the best ones in the country in the city of Littleton. We have a program at the state level to help our companies export. And we also have the Import-Export Bank. All of those entities need to be supported so we can export more from this country. That's ultimately where job growth will come from. I think NAFTA is an important agreement, but we were bound to have problems with labor. The inputs to capitalism, of course, are capital, materials, and labor. And when two trade fairly and one doesn't, you're bound to have massive distortions in the market. And that's exactly what happened with labor and the immigration problem. So we need to look at NAFTA again until Mexico is brought up to a level of development more closely with ours. I mean, that's part of the whole EU concept, is countries have to have a similar level of development before you can truly have a free trade agreement between them, or you have these distortions or the problems that we have with China. Those things have to be taken into account. As far as the UN doesn't have an army. The UN doesn't get involved in prosperity issues. It's an incredibly important organization for humanitarian issues, women's issues all over this world, and other disadvantaged groups.
What is the one most important thing the government should do to revive the economy and affect the creation of more jobs?
Well, the Congress has already done it. They passed H.R. 5297, the Small Business Lending Fund, which Mr. Kaufman added an amendment to and then voted against. This provides a $30 billion fund to be loaned to small banks by the government and then loaned to small businesses. It has to be paid back in 10 years, and it does not add to the deficit. The support of small business, I would say, is absolutely the best thing we can do, and the government moved forward with that bill. That bill also includes all sorts of tax breaks that investors can take when they invest in small businesses and those jobs that are created from them.
I would say one of the biggest things on Congressman Kaufman's mind is to stop the out-of-control spending. Issues that Mr. Fleurlage referred to are really targeted spending to pick winners and losers by our federal government instead of across-the-board tax cuts that lets every business flourish. One of the things that he does believe in, the best way to stimulate our economy is to not to overburden private business and individuals in making the decisions that they would choose for themselves. When you pick winners and losers, you just create a constant system that determines, the government determines all the people who win, I suppose. Sorry about that. One thing I will mention, one of the best ways, besides stopping spending, which I already covered, is lowering marginal tax rates. This is something Congressman Kaufman wrote about recently. We live in an incentive society. America is a society where people, when they work hard and they can keep more of what they earn, they're incentivized to continue to work hard. It worked in 1946 when a Democrat-controlled Congress ignored the wishes of President Harry Truman at the time, who wanted to increase taxes, but was forced instead by Congress to lower them, producing an extraordinary post-World War II boom. It worked in the 60s when Democrat President John Kennedy lowered taxes, stating up front that he believed that by doing so, he would strengthen the economy, and he ultimately brought in more revenues to our government. And that's exactly what happened. President Ronald Reagan lowered taxes in a severe recession in the 80s, and the economy came roaring back. Lowering marginal tax rates creates an incentive for people to work harder and usually produces more revenues for the federal government.
What do you think about the proposed prisoner exchange between Iran and the United States? And how do you think this and similar foreign policy issues should be handled from now on?
start this time. You know, I don't know all the details of that. I don't know who we could exchange, who would be appropriate to exchange with those two hikers, but we do need to continue to develop a relationship with Iran. I'll say, first of all, Iran having a nuclear weapon is an unacceptable situation. With that said, our involvement in that part of the world, both on one side in Iraq and the other side Afghanistan, if we were able to resolve the nuclear issue with Iran, we would certainly be having them as a partner to move forward in that region of the world would be a very important step for peace throughout the world. We're a long way away from that. They are an antagonist of ours at this time. They support terrorism, and of course they're a threat to Israel. So we do have to look farther down the road. The details of the prisoner exchange, I really wouldn't know.
I would say Congressman Kaufman believes that Iran is a terrorist state that engages in state-sponsored terrorism, and he would never negotiate with terrorists in Iran or Iran right now regarding a prisoner exchange. He also feels like conducting a prisoner exchange with Iran would only encourage them to abduct more innocent Americans in order to make demands on us. It's not something he would support.
Mike Kaufman's understanding, what does he think are the main reasons why the economy has rebounded so slowly?
This is from Congressman Kaufman. He goes back to talk about marginal tax cuts and how they haven't helped the economy rebound. He also talks about the Obama administration, along with the Congressional Democrat leadership, has chosen a different path. They've chosen stimulus based on stimulating government and not the private sector, and that is why he believes the economy is not bouncing back. He says now the Democrats want to increase taxes in the middle of a severe economic downturn to fund increases in the size of government that are just, frankly, no longer sustainable. He says that the notion that we will increase taxes on individuals making $200,000 or more, couples making over $250,000 or more, will have a job-killing impact in our economy. Let me find my other page. Sorry about that. I tried to get actual answers from the congressman as opposed to stumbling around. He thinks a lot of people who are in that income bracket are businesses that are privately held sub-Chapter S corporations. So before they can create a new single job out of their net revenues, they will be taxed at the higher rate. What he wants people to understand is that a small business owner typically wants to create jobs and prosper and grow, but these are job-killing measures. He also says regarding this question, the U.S. has among the highest corporate tax rates in the world, only second to Japan. We are simply not competitive globally. We're not letting our businesses compete globally because of our tax structure. So he says our economy is not going to prosper under this administration with those policies.
I have one more to answer to that. It's confidence. We have structural problems in the United States in our economy, but those structural problems are not the problems that cause that portion of our economy not to come back. Everyone knows that the stock market went over 10,800 today. Companies are making, profits are back. Interest rates are at record lows. Much of our economy has bounced back, except the average person on the street doesn't feel it yet, because people haven't started, the hiring hasn't begun. And we had a meltdown in confidence in our country due to reckless policies having to do with regulation and assessment of risk. And people, all sorts of business entities took advantage of that. So as we move to a new regulatory structure, more level playing field, that certainly will come in place, and confidence will come back, and hiring will come back as well.
What do you believe that the fundamental role of the American Constitution is in today's society? Do you think it is important to celebrate the Constitution on Constitution Day? If so, why don't we make it a requirement as part of high school curriculum?
Well, the role of the Constitution is the same as it's always been. It's the ultimate, it's what binds us together as Americans, the basic principles, and they're all contained in the preamble to the Constitution to form a more perfect union, justice, domestic tranquility, the common defense, the general welfare, and liberty for us and to our posterity, our children as well. So that's the basic role of the Constitution. Constitution Day. I don't believe we should, I think local control is a good concept here. We should make it a requirement of high school curriculum, unless local communities want to do that.